Welcome to Black Unquiet Minds, the podcast that amplifies the voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds as they bravely share their stories, struggles, and hopes for a better future. I'm your host, Marius Lancaster, and in each episode, we delve into the depths of intersectional identities and the challenges faced by those living in America. Today, I'm excited to introduce you all to tonight's guest, Ashley Jackson. Ashley is also a Bobcat graduating from Ohio University in 2008 with a BS in Sports Management and Administration. She also has her master's in Organizational Management with an emphasis on health administration. Highly motivated and results-oriented, Ashley has gotten over 15 years of experience in account management and data analysis under her belt. Now she is currently a senior market health analytic consultant for United Healthcare Group here in Cincinnati, just shy of her 2-year anniversary with the company. All that said, Ashley, there is certainly a lot about your background that I cannot wait to dive into. But to start things off, hopefully on what may begin as a lighter note, as a fellow Bobcat, having graduated many years later than yourself, with my first degree from Ohio University in 2020, I can't help but be curious what your experience was like at Ohio University, and more broadly in Southeast Ohio as a woman of color. I think when folks from Ohio often talk about Southeast Ohio, the conversation often pivots around socioeconomic status into the impoverished nature of the area, as that Appalachian region is one of the poorest regions in Ohio, but we don't often hear the area discussed through the lens of diversity, even now. And I'm curious, what were those conversations like when you were there as a student?
Wow. Well, thanks for having me on. As far as with Athens, I think what people are quite surprised about is the amount of minorities that are actually in Athens, or townies as we call them. I think coming from such a large metropolitan city such as Cincinnati and living on campus for 4 years, you really get to kind of understand the town's dynamics, or where to go to get your hair products. I mean, it comes down to that resources of what you have to do. I'm very lucky. My friend that I met there at Ohio University, she is a townie, and having her kind of give me an insight to be a Black female in that area is what really allowed me to learn more beyond kind of just the social economic factor, but health disparities and resources that really aren't being addressed within that community. And so for me, being in healthcare, I actually had an opportunity to go back and really study that area and see such, I guess I would say, a dynamic where while socioeconomic is the focus, there really is a lack of representation in the decision makers for that whole area, not just Athens in itself. So there's a lot of room to grow with that, but I think the great thing about the university being there is that by recruiting and having staff, there be literal members of that community are changing the conversations and changing the dynamic, which I hope is for the better. Because if you're saying this was 16 years ago,
yep.
So now I'm hoping to see, just through what you've told me, that Athens in itself will have a larger influence on that whole area, the more that they are able to continue to grow.
No, I guess the reason that I asked that, I do feel like Athens has done a lot, even since my freshman year there going in 2016. I have certainly watched the area change in a way that it's become more open and accepting to different people of different backgrounds. And I love the fact that you brought up Athens townies. I myself, I have a lot of friends that are Athens townies. One of my best friends that's actually coming up this weekend, my buddy Bayon, he's a young Black man from Athens. And I feel like having individuals like him kind of show me around and show me those hidden spots, those hidden gems around Athens, it was extremely helpful to navigating that space. And for me, Bayon actually got on my radar because of another Black man. It was a best friend of mine, David Williams. Basically, he was in a a young entrepreneur program that they offered for black men at the university. And I will say, I love the fact that Ohio University offers so many programs for especially young African American men to connect and network, because it was their relationship and their friendship that actually allowed me to meet Bayon and become friends with him. And so it's funny, all three of us were getting together this weekend to kind of get together, go out for drinks. We haven't seen each other in a while, but it was really the university that allowed for that relationship and all of those relationships to kind of come together and develop. And them giving us that space and really those opportunities, it's not lost on me. But even that said, there's still a lot of things that the university could change and I think should change when it comes to race relations. I myself, I definitely, while I can speak to a lot of the good at that university, I can also unfortunately speak to a lot of the bad that happened to me there when I dealt with Ohio University's police department. I have had, real scars that have lasted and held with me for years.
100%.
Some that are, physical, you can still see them, and some that are just lasting and emotional scars that are underneath that, are never really addressed. And they were caused by individuals at that university. So as much love as I feel like I have for that place, there's still a part of me, and I talk about it in some of my early episodes, that I don't feel like those spaces were made for us. And Ohio University does a good job of kind of trying to tailor those spaces to be more inclusive. But at the end of the day, those spaces still inherently aren't made for us.
So I 100% agree with a lot of that. I like to look at Athens as kind of a bubble of a world. OU is in the center of that, and it can control a lot of how you want it to be seen as far as being a minority, because they have different programs. I don't know if they still have links.
Oh yeah, I was a part of Links. I was a Links mentor.
So I was part of Links, and that's what got me kind of introduced to the community. But then the employees are members of Athens the town. And so while I did have a great experience having interactions with a lot of them, there was a lot of them going, I know when you get home, there's a Confederate flag in front of your house. And when I was there, it was like, unless you have a parent dying, you're not going on 32 at night. And that's a reality. And I think some people lose focus of that as much as we were here, and yes, we all have each other, especially a lot of it being athletes, because that was the first thing that the largest population was mostly brought in from athletics.
Oh, yeah.
And so you kind of have this bubble around us that everything's fine, but in reality, we're in a very low economic area, very high on, I would say, right-wing ideals.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on that. And how do you have that coexist without losing the overall community? Because as much as OU makes Athens, it's not all of it.
Right.
And then, so I see what you're saying of how much can the university do compared to the city of Athens does. Because ultimately, they're going to have a larger impact on the stores that we go into or business owners that are allowed to come up there. I mean, you would think that there would be a black hairstylist. That would be a mecca. But if they can't get a lease, if they can't have that opportunity to thrive a business, now we're driving to Lancaster, Columbus, to get basic needs. I remember the first time I had to get a relaxer. This was back in the day. And I called my mom. I'm like, I don't know what I'm about to do. Didn't have a car. So you have to lean in on your internal community at OU. And I think by creating spaces for that internal community, it'll have a strength that hopefully these are people kind of like yourself, that if you are going up there for a teaching, are you going to plant your roots there?
Right.
Because that's going to change the overall picture of how Athens influences OU. But, I mean, again, you're going to kind of against polar opposites
Mm-hmm.
and somehow trying to make it all mesh. I do think that OU is definitely striving in that area, but there's lots of room that I think economically that they're not allowed people like us to be in that space.
Yeah, I think about when I want to go back to Athens to visit, especially because like my buddy Bayon, he still lives there, and I want to interact with the city.
Mm-hmm.
I always find myself, on Court Street, kind of like reliving like my old days there, and enjoying my times just between the bars and the different shops there. But even though I'm going to Athens, like you said, I'm not really interacting with the other parts of Athens because they weren't spaces that I was really able to exist in or go out into. I did my freshman year. I dated a woman, and this is one thing. Like I've definitely dated outside of my race a lot, and so I dated a white Athens townie while there, and I was shown some spaces that I'll be honest, like. After our relationship, I don't know that I would have ever gone back into those spaces.
You are great, because I don't even know if I've been in those spaces.
It was one of those where I just wanted to get to know, like, 'cause with any partner, you want to get to know them and where they're from. And it was really special because this is where I was going to school. Like, this is, we talk about, OU being your home with the O and the U in the middle. And it's just you see the Bobcat tattoo. And it's one of those where, like, I want to be able to know what my home really is. And I know it's more than just Court Street and this campus. Like, it is this entire community that connects us all. And it feels bad when I think about a place that I spent a good portion of my adulthood. I don't necessarily view all those parts of it as a true home to me or a place that I can really say I belong to, even though I spent years of my life there.
So 100% agree with you on that. And I think what changed for me was I've had the opportunity to go back to OU in a professional setting. Very rare. I actually got to work on them as their data consultant for a few years. And I was like, I get paid to go to Athens? Yeah. And the big part about that was the project that I worked on was looking at health disparity within Athens community. Mm-hmm. So while, again, that's why I was saying, while the university makes up a majority of that, the big thing is whatever we do in the OU bubble is going to affect, in some wavelength, the community. Mm-hmm. I think it was like 78% of the staff there are locals. Mm-hmm. So all the way down from the maintenance people up to your professors, how do you make a healthcare system in an area that doesn't have a level 2 trauma center for children? Mm. Their closest hospital for children is in Columbus, Ohio, at Nationwide. So I think from my perspective, being in the healthcare field, it allowed me to go, what can I do as a woman of color who does love my school? I loved OU in that bubble, but how can I make an impact to Athens? And for me, I think through what I could do was allow my research and my data to make choices or opportunities for that employer to go, okay, you're telling me that my minority demographic isn't seeking mental health. Why is that? Well, let's look at the availability of doctors in that area. Mm-hmm. If we're looking at a list of 50 and 49 of them are white, do I going to feel comfortable going to those members and talking about my problems? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Now we throw in social economic status. Do I have the money to go travel to Columbus? To go to a variety or probably I would say having more options as far as from an ethnicity point of view or gender, but think about members who could be trans. within Athens. Those numbers are even smaller.
Yeah.
So now we have a huge mental health awareness that we're not fulfilling because they don't have the resources there. And what can I do in my space to have whatever impact I can is shine a light on those areas. Because ultimately, those people who are making the decisions don't look like you and me.
Right.
And if no one's at the table presenting those issues to them, going, this is where we see a problem, it will get checked off the list as something that's not even a topic of conversation. Because we offer you healthcare, right? You have mental health resources. But for who? And so that's where, for me in healthcare, if what I can do in my space to highlight that in wherever area I'm at, that's what I hope to use towards influencing change. And so when I got them as a client, as small as it is in the pie, I help shine light on things that I hope in the long run shape the change for that town. Mm-hmm. Because then you do have generations continuing to grow there. Because they're there.
Right.
And that's where you want to make sure that the resources that they have are available to them, and not just because the bigger whole is the dominant. Because no one's at that table having it. I see it all the time. I see it here even in metropolitan Cincinnati, that the disconnect of employers not knowing what the true meaning of, like, I offer them benefits, but you're not even offering them anything that they can take. And I'm talking large employer.
Oh, yeah.
With a large minority, they're like, we give them health care. Well, 75% of them are financially insecure. Mm-hmm. You think I'm thinking about the doctor when I don't know if I'm going to have food on the table? Or they're living in a food desert? But that's, again, where having that space to have that conversation is what, as small as it is, can make small ripples that can turn into waves. What you hope. It's what you hope to put out there. So, to a long story short on that, do I think that OU has the opportunity? Absolutely. Do I think they're doing it in small waves? Yeah. Small ripple effects.
Well, thank you for giving some insight on your experience as a Bobcat. I know I have some peers listening in to this podcast that are certainly going to resonate with some of the experiences you've shared so far. Though with a resume as impressive as yours, it makes me wonder, as someone who's also studied management at the graduate level, but who has had limited experience in either management or leadership roles professionally, I have to ask, what were some of the key factors that led to you being offered that breakout opportunity or position? And then additionally, were those factors that led you to those high-level roles the same factors that allowed you to stay in that space? Or have they changed over time, requiring some sort of pivot or mindset shift when you got to that level in corporate America?
A lot of pivots.
Okay.
So, oddly enough, I did not recognize this until just, I would say, 2 or 3 years ago, when I looked at my LinkedIn profile. Mm-hmm. A year and 9 months. That was my magic number. And the reason I say that is because every opportunity I've been given, I was actually an Inroads alum. Shout out to Inroads, which is actually a scholarship program for minority students. They actually pair you with a Fortune 500 company where you have a internship. Okay. At a Fortune 500 company throughout the summer. Typically, it could last anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And upon that, you're offered a full-time job. So I had a lot at the time. Had an offer from, I could say it, Centos, and one from Coca-Cola. And I was being in sports mm-hmm. and looking at that kind of trajectory of where I could go. I did Coca-Cola, but I know some people who did the Centos who are in senior level director because they started out in college with mm-hmm. the internship. So as I came out of those opportunities, I've learned that I've been in spaces that they've never let anyone who looked like me, whether it be my age, my gender, or my race. So I was the youngest intern, only minority intern in the Midwest Coca-Cola's ever had.
Oh, wow.
And this was 2000, 5, 6. So we're not
That's hard
talking
to
like
believe,
it's that
yeah.
long ago. So for me to be in that space, they didn't even know what to do with me. Actually, they said they gave me a corporate card and a car for the summer, and I checked in with my boss once a week, and he's like, "You still driving around town?" I'm like, this is any other person could have taken this opportunity and done nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I took it, and I was like, they're giving me the opportunity, they're giving me the resources, and I spent the past 2 summers driving around all of Kentucky, which, by the way, yeah, don't recommend.
Yeah.
But what I learned from that experience is that sometimes they're going to offer you positions in corporate America and give you enough rope to fall with. Mm-hmm. So you can either take it or absorb as much as you can from that position, knowing that that's about where you're going to be. You're going to stop right there, because anything else would be too much. They say a lot of times you got to work twice as hard for half as much. I think I'm a living example of that. Mm-hmm. I came in to probably the position I held the longest and had the most growth. But I came in with 2 degrees. There were people that were moving up in management that had no background in it. I distinctly remember 3 years before it was implemented, me writing saying, I know that this is just coming from my coursework, but we have to have a culture change. Mm-hmm. We're growing at a pace where the culture is changing a little bit, and people want to be acknowledged. Otherwise, you have people who don't want to check in. There's a lot of people out here who just go in, check in, and check out. Mm-hmm. Are we nurturing the people who want to grow? Now, this is someone, I didn't have to say that. I just recognize that because that's, for me, I'm trying to do better for the department. Let's test my knowledge out. Mm-hmm. But not everyone that has a degree knows how to run a business.
That is very true.
Okay. 3 years later. You're at a 70% retention rate. People coming on jobs for 3 weeks and leaving. It all comes into the balance is sometimes they don't like the fact that you have the answer. Mm-hmm. They don't like the fact that you might be able to do their job. So looking for an ally, looking for someone who's going to be able to support you in that, even if they have to go against their management. Because in that world, that's where it becomes really crazy. Mm-hmm. So like I told you an instance where like I got verbally assaulted by a coworker. Had that been me, I'd be packing a box. Mm-hmm. They brought me in an office and told me how many times he goes to church a week. They didn't want to put it in my file because they didn't want it to affect me later in my career. That I look like I'm hard to work with. Mm-hmm. So when you're in that space, how do you react? Now, I'm feisty. I got one of my friends who's a lawyer to make a very lovely threatening letter saying if we don't have the XYZ done, she can file a lawsuit. Because it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was an assault. Technically, you don't stand over another colleague of yours and yell at the top of your lungs, mm-hmm. no matter how angry you are. But because he was a white man, I have to remind yourself, Ashley, that this is out of the ordinary. That people throw shoes. People, when it gets to that higher level where you think, oh, they're going to have some professionalism or decency about themselves, a lot of the times you see the complete opposite. Mm-hmm. And it's tolerated, depending on the organization. And then, if you don't have an ally in that room, you are missing out on promotions. You are missing out on making sure that you're even, I mean, women don't even make as much as men, let alone a black woman. With 2 degrees, I had to earn my title. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people get taken a chance on. This is the first where I'm at now where I have been acknowledged for the expertise I bring to the table. But this is also an international company where they don't have those, they can't really, to survive, have those biases in those rooms to the best of their extent. Now, I'm in the Midwest market. There's
Right.
still some blocks there that I'll have to face, but compared to another organization where all the way up it looks like them, different. The last organization I worked with, as far as from a data analytics standpoint, only person of color in the country. So when you're dealing with those numbers, how do you take that space and make it yours?
Right.
But also too, how do you do a balancing game? Because if this is the first time they've ever seen me at a table, yeah, sometimes as much as I want to pop someone with a twisted tea, I'm dead serious. I gotta hold back because I don't want that door to shut for the next person. Because they'll take that and run with it. If I slip, we took a chance. We can't do that. And a lot of the times, you take a chance on someone who doesn't even halfway care what the outcome for your organization is. Because it comes back to kind of like gluttony. What can I get out of this situation? And so it's a tricky dance. I tell people all the time, certain spaces are not cut for everyone because you do have to adjust yourself accordingly.
Right.
And trust me, it hurts to say, but when I was telling you about the woman who did racial slurs at a work event, my ally within the office said, before I even said anything, I can think of 3. Before I even told him who it was. So he knows that this is happening. And that's why I think the importance of, like, as much as I want to educate that person and tell them off, I need him to stop those conversations when he can think of multiple people. And so that's what I guess over my 15 years is from working in Atlanta, Georgia, all the way up to Cincinnati. You definitely will see all types of politics. I also noticed living in Atlanta, when I worked in Atlanta, it was the black women who were against me. Now that was crazy because we're supposed to be in this space together. But again, are we uplifting each other or are we scratching because we want that one position?
Right.
And so navigating that at 21, 22 years old, my mom was like, you have more going on in your career than she saw in 30 years, and we're in the same industry. But she also, when she reached her peak as a regional director for a large carrier, they stopped her. Told her that interpersonal relationships. So that was one of my things where she, code switch with the wrong person. And that person ended up saying it. So I've had to learn that it's not just our own people I have to be aware of, but you're also fighting this other force too. And you got to make sure that the allies that you have, whatever they may be, truly do have your best interest at heart. And learning from my mom's experience, I think, is what prepared me at a younger age to get into these rooms that typically would be offered to, say, someone a senior to me. But that's a life lesson. That's all I hope is that when people ask, like, how was your experience coming from private school going to college? The only thing I took from that is that I now have a comfort level being in a room that's not wanting me there. And I don't have the magic answer, but I do say that whoever, in whatever industry that they're in, always make sure that you find allies, whether they be in HR or in another market. But you have to have those moments to have someone to bounce off of to make sure that, we call it a mood elevator. Are you reacting to the response of this person because it's affected you and your trauma and what you're dealing with? Or is this truly something where I need to have this taken to HR? Because that's the moments when you were saying, like, the comment about the dog and hay. to your point, you had a debrief meeting because that needed to be addressed. There's sometimes where you hear some off cuff moments and you're like, I had a guy go, I'm really surprised for as dark as your skin is that your hands are soft.
Yeah, that's an instant HR.
Yeah. So you have to have these moments where you're like, okay, am I in my feelings or did you straight up just say that? And also making sure that your HR person understands you.
Yep. That is very important. Having an HR background, I've noticed that in working with my different HR units, not everyone is as educated on human resources as I am. And on top of that, I think often with the role of HR, at the end of the day, while yes, you are worried about your employees, you are really protecting the company.
100%.
And it's hard to think about, and this, when I think about corporate America, like all of this is just unsustainable. This is an experiment that I feel like we have been doing in our society since it has, come to be. And we're getting to the point where we know that our society initially was made for individuals that don't look like us. It was made for primarily white men. Just put it out there.
It is.
I know there's a lot of white women that might feel some type of way when I say that, but society wasn't made for you. It was made for white men. Landowning white men at that. There were also indentured servants that were white men that were seen as less than. I think one of the most toxic things that I've noticed in talking with some of the white individuals that will kind of forget my background when they speak to me. I have that private school background where I've spoken to individuals where I love to throw this fact out there. I went to Cincinnati Country Day, and our senator, Robert Portman, his daughter, Sally Portman, was my peer mentor. It's like it was that affluent of a school and an institution that we were talking to very famous individuals. And so I would speak to individuals that, didn't look like me. They were white, Caucasian, preppy males, and they would talk about other white poor people. And a lot of them even expressed to me that they viewed white poor people as less than, black people, or at least less than myself, because it was one of those, like, how are you going to let yourself be poor? You've got every opportunity, every resource, every benefit, every privilege, but yet you still can't make it out of the struggle, and you let this person of color surpass you. You're so much less than. And it's one of those where when I hear poor white people kind of uplift the Donald Trumps of the world, I guess the wealthy but uneducated individuals out there that propagate things that are against their best interest, being a poor, uneducated white person.
Crazy?
It's just one of those where it's hard to understand up into a point where I think they also haven't been given educational resources and tools. I think about how, I guess, ignorant some individuals of color can be, and primarily when I think about them, I think, well, it's just they haven't been given the tools, the resources, the opportunities, and it's my privilege that in some ways I see poor white folks, and I'm just like, well, they've got privilege, they should be able to do these things, but in some situations, they have just as many resources as those like poor individuals of color. They might have privilege behind them in certain spaces when it comes to how they're viewed, but
100%.
The resources, they're still lacking, so they don't get that education. Now that view can shift their perspective to where they have a very different view on life than you do as a poor individual of color, even though you guys come from that same socioeconomic status. It's just
100%.
they had that privilege that allowed them to have a different perspective but they also aren't educated to the people that are really doing them a disservice. So it's one of the hardest things to navigate in this world, talking to someone that is uneducated but doesn't want to be educated. They don't want to know any better, because if only they knew better, they could help not only me by being an ally, but oftentimes themselves, because they too have been done filthy in this country.
100%. And I think that's the big thing of, kind of like to my point about Athens. Some of the times, do you realize where you're at and what lies there? Because for me, that's a lot of things of like when you look at the scholarships and stuff for the Appalachian area, right? I mean, as far as getting fully funded, you would think that it would be list upon list of people signing up. There's not. Because that goes back into the household. And like you said, the education of like, is that something to pursue? And is that even going to change the trajectory of a family? Because to get a 4-year degree or to get a 2-year degree, even if that, at a branch campus, could be substantial for your family in the long run. But if you don't have any resource around you looking at you, it is easy for a lot of people, especially from a social economic point, to point fingers and go, you stole my spot. You took that away from me. What did I take? You have the resources. Coming from someone going to Seven Hills, I completely understand. I'll never forget. The funniest thing happened to me, I was at a job and they had an internship program for, I believe it was like high school in Kentucky or something like that.
Okay.
And all they said was that we have some interns here for the summer who are going to be walking around the office, blah, blah, blah. This woman pulls me aside and was like, I'm just so happy that they were giving opportunities for your people to come into the office place and learn and blah, blah. Now, mind you, I'm a full-time employee. And I went, well, ma'am, I went to Seven Hills. And she went, huh? And I went, I'm not an intern. I work here. And I do think the program's great. But that kid over there is from the program. And the look on her face of going like, well, how was I supposed to know? How? Your own ignorance?
Yeah.
But that's, again, where they can't even imagine that their own people needed an opportunity too. And that, to your point, it's one of those things where, like, that still gets me heated. The affirmative action being overturned.
Oh, yeah.
When people keep saying, oh, this was always something to just give spaces to people. Spaces that I've worked twice as hard for. See, I think what they're underestimating is the fact that we weren't getting opportunity for. That's why affirmative action was created. So the fact of the matter is, I heard some podcast guy say, well, now we're admitting that Michelle Obama is dumbwitted. Excuse me? Because of it, the woman went to Harvard. She was making more than her husband before he decided to go run for president. She was at the top of her game. You mean to tell me because of an action to get her on an even playing field that now she's dumb? But that's where I have to remember that there are people sitting across from me that think that. And I have to make sure that whatever you think, you're going to think. But every job I have, I'm going to absorb the things that you don't even want to. People used to make fun of me. I read the manual. A 300-page manual on this data platform system. Why? None of y'all are willing to train me. And when you train me enough for me to just know the basics. Right. So what can I do? I'm going to go absorb all that information. Now people are sitting there going like, oh, well, she's an expert at this and this and this. None of you wanted to invest in me, even though I had the criteria worth investing in. So I already know that your bias is against me or you're intimidated by me. And I hate that word because I'm going, I fought for the space. Because if I say you did give it to Sam or Joe, would they be taking it as serious as I am? So when people tell me, oh, I'm grateful for it to overturn and all this stuff, I'm looking at them going like, you have no idea what it feels like to be in a room that people don't want you in. And if there was an assistance to help me get there, thank you. Why did you think that the whole reason we have historical black colleges wasn't because we were trying to be on our own, because we just weren't liking Harvard? We weren't allowed in the space. So why are you mad about people going to create something for themselves to better their lives? And that's why I always, to your point about different social economic systems, I think that it gets lost in translation too. Because if you want to continue to say that someone took your spot, you probably will agree with Donald Trump. You probably do want to go back to a time where it was know your place. But now that you're in a space where you're seeing people like me flourish, now I've taken something from you that you didn't want, because you could have gotten it. My family, I didn't come from multi-generational family that went to college. I'm the first one in my family to hold a master's. That changes the way my family's going to view education in the future. My grandma had an 8th grade education. So when you look at that, yes, we can change, but the fight has to be there for everyone. And I think that a lot of what we're seeing in politics is that people don't want to listen to the people who are fighting for them, because they want the handout. When you look at Medicaid and all that stuff, oh, well, it's all the minorities that are on. We don't even make up the majority of a country. You think a whole system we are draining? It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, I think people don't even add that up.
Well, you gotta think. It's the uneducated trying to like think about a topic that you need to be educated to discuss. So
100%. But then you let someone who gets up there and I'm not even going there, talks in a way that my favorite things ever on YouTube when those people are interviewed, questions, like basic questions like, do you believe that a woman should be president? And they're like, no, because she has hormones and she'll start a war. Okay. So what all the wars from the past get started by? And you're sitting there and this woman's dead serious. She doesn't care. You could tell her the sky's purple if Donald Trump told her it was purple, and she'd go, well, that's the way it was. And that blindness leadership is where I can't understand.
I think with some of that, though, we live in a world where, I work as a phones rep, and I code switch often, and it's gotten to the point where in my life, it's not even so much code switching that I'm almost... One of my favorite movies is the M. Night Shyamalan, Split, and I feel like it's almost getting to the point of developing a split personality to go out into the world. My name is Marius. People call me Marius all the time. And when it's just one of those, especially white people, they will go out and they're just like, oh, I'm confident this person's name is exactly what I said it is and it's nothing else. So how you doing, Marius? And so basically when I go into those spaces and I hear those things, I have to be Marius. It's one of those where a flip switches and I engage with them in a way that only Marius would. The Marius, that the real me that actually cares about things, that wants to make some changes in life, he's not going to talk to these people. Marius, the financial services rep that's just going to send your money and is okay with you saying whatever you want to him, he'll work with you. But the real me, I'm not gonna do that. And I think politicians and a lot of people, it's getting to the point where I feel like they have a similar mindset where they don't believe the things that they're saying, on MSNBC or Fox News or NBC. There's no way that you can convince me that Marjorie Taylor Greene actually believes that Jewish space lasers are causing, climate change and things like that. Like, no person of sound mind, I feel like, could believe that. Now, I'm not even saying she's of sound mind, but I'm just like, I don't think that there's a person out there that can, like, go out and function and especially be a part of, like, maybe I'm giving our political systems too much credit.
I think you're about to give them too much credit.
I don't know that you can engage in that job and still go out and, I guess, in your heart, believe those things. I can believe that you can just spew filth on TV, but I don't believe that at the end of the day you can go home and actually believe that.
A week and a half ago, the man on the House floor referred to colored people flipping the tongue to the point where he didn't even understand. They had to strike it off the record because a black woman from Ohio had to go, excuse me, what? Some people are getting too comfortable, I feel, with their political views, and they are starting to have those conversations that they were having at home on our House floor.
I guess maybe it's
And I think it's so outrageous because we're sitting here going, am I in the 1950s or am I in 2023?
Yeah, maybe it's because I'm a young man and I'm like, this is things I heard about, during like civil rights era and like segregation time, like Jim Crow era. Like, there's no way that we're still, 2023 having these conversations.
I think it was just July 12th or like 13th. He was making a bill of saying that they essentially want the best of the best within the Army or the military system, and that we shouldn't have just colored people as a requirement. Now, I know good and well that someone wrote something for him that had to be better. People of color, whatever he wanted to say, but he said it so naturally because we've gotten to that point now. We've allowed a man to go, locker room talk can be anywhere. Yeah. So when people go, why is everything changing? We haven't done much change. They're just trying to retain what they had a couple of years ago. 40, 50, because people keep thinking like 1950 and all that stuff. No, my mother is from that generation. My mother. So when you start telling me, oh, it was a long time ago, beat that.
Yeah.
Title IX wasn't around until the 70s, 80s. I'm like sitting here going like, women... No offense to white women, I got a lot of y'all as friends, but y'all some, like, everything should be fine. Y'all didn't have rights either, so why are you sitting up here signing off with what your husband says? You haven't been given the same privy that long either. And I think, too, a lot of people don't want to take the initiative to educate themselves, and so they do listen to whoever is on that platform. And as miseducated as they may be, they follow along because that's what they read or heard. And there's no one fact checking anymore because there's thousands and thousands of resources. And now you got to put it on our own people too. Like, just because you see such and such up there, you better be making sure that this man or this woman is really trying to help your community.
Oh, yeah. Not all skin folk are kin folk.
Exactly. And I tell that people all the time, oh, well, what do you think about such and such? Did you research them? Did you see them trying to pass a bill that's going to take XYZ away from your neighborhood? Or they want to put it... And I think, for me, my biggest thing with all the politics, because we're about to go into that rotation here soon, with the election coming up, is like, as much as I love social media, and as much as I love the fact that we try to TikTok and all that stuff, check your sources once or twice.
Oh, yeah.
Because these are decisions that when you sit up here now and everyone's talking about the milk is $4 or $5 and your eggs and gas, all that was up for discussion. But did you care about what your politician did? About his wife or affairs or what? That's what I feel like. We get so caught up into the mundane. They flip stuff through all the time. Mm-hmm. All the time. And then we sit here and we go, how do we get here?
I mean, we have a surprise election coming up here in Ohio on August 8th. And it's just like, most Ohioans don't even know about
what it is. And that's what I'm saying is with getting involved with your community is beyond just going, okay, I support XYZ because they look like me. Make sure those people who look like you support you in the ideals that you want. Because a lot of people out here have their own narrative and their own clout that they're trying to chase.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, what I've learned is that that's in every single industry: financial services, healthcare systems, education. There's a lot of changes being made within these walls that I think that if we don't have the right people there speaking on our behalf, it'll have some type of change. So kind of to your point, when I worked for another financial institution, I wasn't raised around whole life, annuities, 529 plan. That wasn't discussions that were going on in my family.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't opportunities or programs where people were coming into the communities and going, these are things that set up. Now, whether that might be financial straight, but I know a lot of Black people who don't have wills, simple wills. And so that kind of money under the bed mentality is what we continue to see generation after generation. And what I learned is as I'm sitting there and I'm talking to XYZ Bali Joe, who's putting in $7,500 and he's continuing to see it grow, it wasn't, oh, I got to make six figures before I can invest. Mm-hmm. It was the $35 a month on this whole life policy, getting it at age 20 and building it up. But no one wants to have those discussions. And so now if we're not having that discussions, we don't have that knowledge to make those decisions for us to better our children. Because I know a lot of people my age who don't know anything about annuities. They know, put it in your 401k. If you got anything more than that, maybe put it in a separate account for some investments, maybe stock. Mm-hmm. I'm ignorant. I don't even know what crypto is. I'm trying to get into that right now. I'm teaching myself that. But I say that to say that's the one thing I will give the other advantage to other ethnicity groups is that when it comes to knowledge sharing, they're way better of getting that generational wealth developed. Like, land is king. Why do you think all these real estate brokers are out there? Land is king. So while, yes, you can go get the cars and all that, I will continue to driving my simple car if I can go take that differential and put it in investment property. Mm-hmm. But I'm lucky enough to have an aunt who did that to show me that that was feasible. Because she bought property downtown in OTR in the 80s where they were giving it 10, 15 a pop. Mm-hmm. She just sold in 2022. And I can tell you, she did very well for herself. But no one was teaching her that. Mm-hmm. No one was saying, hey, as a minority woman, maybe you need to be buying these up because in 20 years, 3CDC is going to go buy it up all. And then now you want to say that you want minority owners down there? Mm-hmm. And what was $10,000, $15,000 10, 13 years ago is going for 80, 90. I saw a building with the roof caved in. Could have bought it for 11,000. Wish I would have. Investors came in, paid that, flipped it. One unit is going for $1.5 million.
Oh, wow.
And so you look at that, and that's what my whole thing was, is that when I told my aunt when she sold, I said, find minorities. Mm-hmm. Find someone else that wants to. Now, granted, she wasn't going to be a fool. Like, she's going to pay that out, but give this town another 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm very big on us always trying to better ourselves in realms where we weren't necessarily educated in. Mm-hmm. And I think the highest ones are probably financial services and politics. Because I think a lot of that is just we go with what the person before us did.
Right. If anything, I definitely feel like being in the financial services industry as well as being a well-educated black man, yes, I can talk for days about my student loans and the burdens that I feel like I have to bear growing up in a world that doesn't want to pay for education, but wants the abilities that I have being an educated black man. We can talk about that till I'm blue in the face, but I know that I have an obligation to push forward and to kind of propel my community and to use the gifts that I've gotten to help others, because at the end of the day, it really is like you said, we've been watching for generations people put money under their pillows for them to die leaving nothing, having no beneficiaries on their accounts, having no last will and testament, having no life insurance.
100%.
We have seen this for generations. And when we think about generational wealth, I was privy to a presentation that we did at my employer, and one of the things that we talked about was generational wealth between a black family and a white family. And we just looked at the average white family in terms of generational wealth has over $247,000 in like assets or liquid cash, however you want to look at it. The black family on the same bar for generational wealth, if you average it out, is $8. $8. We're going from 6 digits to a singular figure. That should not exist. And this is still what we're looking at as current day stats.
I'm 100% with you.
I know that working in the financial services industry, we are 2 generations behind, and I have to do everything, work, like you said, twice as hard for half as much.
Yep.
Because the thing about having half as much for us, that's exponential growth if you look at it compared in that big picture.
100%.
Because when you start at, $8, if you can grow to 100,000, just think about how much that really is.
So much there I love is that my mom had me as an older woman. So my mom was born in 1954. So I can tell that is our generational mindset. And my mom's very accomplished in her career. She's made good money. She has the 401k, the life insurance, the term life insurance, which if anyone is listening, please invest in whole life. I'm like big on getting people to realize that they're financial tools for people to use. But the biggest thing that I saw with her is I'm getting in an argument with her about having a will. I don't got that much. You have something. Protect what you have. Oh, I don't need to get all that. That it costs too much. No, there are a ton of resources in our communities that will do a basic last will and testament for people. And the drama that I see that happens especially within people of color communities who don't have this, is now you fighting over what? Jewelry, assets. No one's talking about the 401ks. No one's doing maybe a life insurance, maybe a policy, maybe you got a burial policy.
And then you have to fight through the probate court.
And you have to go through all of that. And I'm going, all of that could have been solved with one piece of paper. Oh, well, you're my only child. What if I'm not here? What, do you have a backup? Do we have backup?
Where are contingent beneficiaries?
What are we looking at as far as the long journey? And I think just knowing that she's not that far removed as far as from a generational standpoint, that there's a lot of people in that 60, 70 range right now who are not even properly thinking about. I mean, my mom's still under the mentality that if you started working at 16, you're going to have enough in Social Security credits. She can't grasp that. I'm looking at her going, that won't exist when I become 65, 70, 72. If I don't have my 401k and my other retirement options on lock, I'll be working then. She's like, well, my friends are retired and I'm the last one. There's people at Walmart, 85 years old, still working. Why? Because the system wasn't built for us to sustain 20 years past retirement. And I think that's as a nation. Also, we just weren't living as long. But I definitely think that we're at a point where you can't have a basic lifestyle on Social Security. So, but I don't see that within our community where we're looking at that age range going, what are you doing to properly make sure that everything's going to be okay? And then that comes into that generational teaching of like, when do we break that cycle? Like, if we don't set ourselves up for our kids to know these are tools that we might not be all the way approved. Like I said, the crypto, I wish I could go buy like like some stock in that, because I do see that being something that's going to change the way. But at least I have the knowledge.
Right.
And if I can have a child and then give them that knowledge, maybe they'll be the first one to start investing in it. So I think that's where that conversation has to come into. What are we doing with our knowledge, and how are we impacting the generations in our community with it?
Okay. No, I definitely agree. And if anything, I know we have to close because I feel like we've definitely given some thought-provoking conversation here. And I can't wait to see the ways that our audience is really going to engage in this, because I feel like we really hit on some heavy topics. So with all that said, Ashley, I definitely want to thank you for your time and having you on to the podcast today. It's certainly been a pleasure. And as I always say, I've been your host, Marius Lancaster. Thank you for listening. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop seeking the truth.